he said, Adam, Lloyd's been attacked. And then there was a bit of a pause, and then he said, he's dead. The charity was going to be about preventing violence through education. But then also taking on the police force was probably not a wise idea. The anger for me was actually towards my mum, but to them, violence isn't sexy enough.
So you've met up with one of the killers. Welcome back, everyone. Today's episode is very different than the ones I've already done. Today I'm joined by Adam Fouracre, and Adam has got an amazing story. But unfortunately, this story begins with a tragic accident. In 2005, on the 25th of September, his brother, Lloyd, was brutally murdered on his way back home from a party. Since then, Adam has created a charity called Stand Against Violence and has gone on to do amazing things. And the reason I'm giving you this introduction is because I have a brother, and when I was reading up on Adam's story, it sort of made me think, what if this had happened to my brother? What would I have done? And I'm just in shock and amazed by the story he has. And today, Adam will talk just about that, the charity he's built, the life he's lived so far, and everything in between. Adam, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we're also joined by a cute dog today. You won't see the dog unless she makes an appearance. Tilly's on the floor at the moment.
She's being very well behaved.
Very well behaved, yeah.
See, I told you, if I put my jumper on the floor, then she'll usually sleep on it. Mainly because she knows she's making it really wet. So yeah, sure. So I'll love putting that back on afterwards.
Yeah, I bet. And it's raining as well, so you'll be doubly wet.
Yes, wow, can't wait.
Yeah. So Adam, let's start back in 2005. Walk me through what happened that night and the events.
So my brother had been at a friend's 18th birthday party. So he was 17 and he was actually 18, going to be 18 the next day. And he and a small group of friends stayed behind to help tidy up after the party. And when they were leaving the venue, they were going not far, just round the corner, back to one of their friends' houses where they were spending the night. And as they were walking, this group were coming in the opposite direction, and something was said and a fight broke out. I say it was a fight, it was more of an attack. And Lloyd and his group of friends tried to run to get away from their attackers, and unfortunately Lloyd was the tallest, so I guess therefore seen as the biggest threat and also the slowest. And they hit him over the head with a wooden sign, which knocked him out straight away. And then they hit him again whilst he was on the floor with the wooden sign. And then they kicked him in the face, kicked him in the stomach, stamped on his head. Basically beat him to death. And he was unconscious, hopefully, from the first blow. So we don't think he felt anything, but he was taken to the local A&E department, and my parents were called, and when they arrived, they were told that all his organs were shutting down and that there's nothing they could do. And basically, he died from catastrophic brain injuries and suffered multiple facial and rib fractures.
How old were you when you found out?
So I was just 19. There's 18 months between us. So I think I probably would have been 19.
And who told you? How did you find out?
I got a phone call from my dad. I was working as a healthcare assistant at the time, so I had a really early start that morning. And the phone was ringing, and like when you're in that sort of half awake, half asleep situation. You're not really sure what's going on. And I thought it was my alarm, and I was like, oh no, it's not time to get up already. And I remember whacking my alarm, to try and silence it, and it wasn't working. I was like, what's going on? And that's when I was like, oh, it's the phone. So I managed to get out of bed and get the phone. And when I realized my dad was on the other end of the phone, I was kind of like, why are you phoning me? It's like 2 in the morning, 2 in the morning. I've got to be up. My instant reaction in my half sleepy state was like, why are you phoning me? I didn't think, well, that's very unusual for my dad to phone me, so maybe something's wrong. And the signal was really crackly, so it was really difficult to hear what he was saying. And anyway, he eventually the signal sort of cleared, and I realized that it didn't help because he was crying as well. So it was, well, was it the signal or was it just the fact that he was crying? And at that point, I obviously knew that something serious was wrong. I thought, I've never seen or heard my dad cry. Then, what's happened to mum? What's, happened to my grandparents? And he said, Adam, Lloyd's been attacked. And then there was a bit of a pause, and then he said, he's dead. And yeah, so that's how I found out. And I've said it quite a few times before, but when the word dead is just a word, but when you hear it in the context of a loved one, it's just it's a brutal word. It's so harsh and final. It's like not a sugar-coated word at all, and it just really sticks in your mind. And this sort of this complete shock. And he said that the police were going to come and pick me up and take me out to the hospital to be with my parents. So get up and get dressed. So that was pretty much the conversation. So then, yeah, that was how I found out.
What did you do after you hung up the phone?
Oh,
Between you hang up the phone and police coming to pick you up?
wandered around the house in a daze. I got dressed, went downstairs. There was my housemate was still up, and he said, "Oh, I thought you'd gone to bed." And I said, "Oh, my brother's been murdered, so the police are coming." And he was like, "Oh, shit." And I was like, "Yeah." And then he disappeared because I guess he didn't know what to say. And then the next thing, my parents turned up. So the police, because there'd been a murder, they didn't have the resources to spare to come and get me. And my parents had been asked to leave because Lloyd, now that he had died, was now considered a crime scene. So they needed to protect the forensic evidence. So they asked my parents to leave. So my parents came and collected me, and we didn't go back to the hospital. From there, we went to my grandparents. Obviously, my mum had already been in touch with them. So they were sort of, lights were on when we got there, and they'd already boiled the kettle because, that's what we do in the UK when times get tough. We have a cup of tea. So, so yeah, so we all sat there drinking tea. It was a very, very weird, surreal situation, just to be sat in complete silence in the middle of the night, having this bombshell dropped on you, and just, yeah, not knowing what to say. There's nothing you can say to make anybody feel any better in that situation.
What were you thinking between you finding out, your parents coming, and then obviously sort of like the same question when you got to the house? What were you thinking? Well, more specifically, what were you thinking before your parents showed up? You said you were walking around the house for days.
Just in a daze, yeah. Just I don't think I was thinking or feeling anything, if I'm entirely honest. I mean, like, when you just suddenly get told at 2 o'clock in the morning, when you're half conscious, that your brother's been murdered, he's dead, and the police are coming to pick you up. That's like, it's just not possible to process that. So I think my brain just went, don't think about it. Like, I didn't know what was going to happen next, and I couldn't connect what I'd been told with reality. So I think I was just, yeah, I don't think I felt or thought much. I just kind of rolled with it.
At what point did you connect that to reality then?
So I think the time I connected it with reality was when I saw him after autopsy. So I left home when I was 16, 17. So I hadn't seen Lloyd for, other than for like family get-togethers, and occasional meetings, like catch up in town. I hadn't really, Lloyd hadn't been a significant part of my daily life for maybe 3 years. You know, I saw him as often as I saw my parents. I didn't, which was frequent, but not, you know, like prior to that, he was in my life every day because we lived together. So it's like, I don't think it really sinks in, because it's like, well, you know, he's still around. I just haven't seen him for a while. So I think whereas for my parents, he was living under their roof, they were seeing him every day. It was a daily reminder that he wasn't there. So for me, I think it was seeing him post autopsy. So we were asked if we wanted to go and see him. And one of the things I remember thinking was, well, you know, it's one of those things that people say, you know, oh, do you want to remember him as he was, or do you want to go and see him one last time? And I thought, well, I didn't get to see him at the hospital. And there was something about that I found difficult, because I thought, well, my parents got to see him when he was still warm, and you could still associate some semblance of life with that person. And so they got to hold his hand, or got to say goodbye to him, whereas I didn't get any of that. So, and I'm sure the reality is vastly different. I'm sure he did not look in a good way at all, and I'm sure it was very, you know, scarring for my parents to see that. So anyway, I went. My parents went as well, but I went, and I went in on my own, and that was really surreal. I walked into the room. He was in a coffin. I was escorted in by two family liaison officers from the police force, who stood at the back of the room, and watched me, which was weird. I mean, I think they were supposed to be there for support, but you know, you've got two random people watching you. And yeah, I didn't even really need to see him until, like, I literally, as soon as I saw the coffin, I just broke down, and I don't think I'd actually cried until that point. And this was like a few weeks after, because I guess I was still in shock and maybe hadn't connected it. But seeing the coffin, and then approaching the coffin and seeing him, that's kind of when it became real. And I think the weird thing is, seeing the coffin was what triggered me to cry, because it was kind of like the link. But as soon as I got up to the coffin and I saw him, I pulled it together, because I then realized that it didn't look anything like him. Like, he was, I mean, his jaw was still broken, so his jaw was deformed. He had ungelled hair. He was pale and waxy and didn't look, you know, was clearly dead. No spirit about him at all. This was not, I very quickly understood that whole thing when they say, when somebody's dead and their spirit's no longer there, it's not them, that kind of really resonated. I was like, yeah, that's not my brother anymore. So that was probably what pulled me together, was that I was then able to go, yeah, okay, that's the person in front of me is not a person. Was my brother, but this is not my brother. So then I was in a very awkward situation of worrying about what the police officers were thinking when they were watching me, because I was like, well, if I just suddenly pull it together and go, right, okay, I'm done now, and walk out, I was then starting to think, like, would they think that was weird? How do you play this? What should I do in this situation? Because, life doesn't prepare you for how to manage seeing your dead brother
Why were you
in a
even thinking
morgue.
about this? Why were you even thinking about, like, what they would think?
That's me. It's for a long time I used to worry about what other people thought, and up until the last couple of years, I really cared what other people thought, and the thought of being judged and all of that sort of stuff. Insecurities,
I see,
basically.
okay. So you walked up to the police after that?
Yeah, so that's when I was kind of like trying to decide how to remove myself from that situation without being judged as like weird. So I thought, well, I will give him a kiss on the forehead, say goodbye, and then leave. Because obviously I've seen people do that on TV, so I thought maybe that would be appropriate. But it was the worst decision I'd made, because it was he'd obviously been refrigerated. He was so cold that it was like kissing marble, and like you could feel all your body heat being sucked out through your lips, and it was such an intense cold. It felt, again, like, from a spiritual point of view, it felt like your soul was being sucked out. It was the weirdest feeling, and horrible, and that is not a feeling that I wanted to be. That's not a memory and a feeling that I wanted to have associated with my brother and what happened. But because I made that decision, that's kind of a memory that will stay with me. But yeah, maybe I looked appropriate at that point, and then I left.
Do you wish you hadn't done that?
Yes. Yeah, I wish I hadn't done that, because it was not a pleasant experience to link to your brother. But, I accept that that wasn't my brother anymore, and, yeah, it was just a really weird situation and a weird experience.
Yeah, I bet. Obviously, you're the oldest brother.
Mm.
So am I. And as I was reading about your story and doing some research on the charity, it sort of came to me when I was a kid. When me and my brother were both kids. I remember this one time. We were always sort of like fighting with each other, I think.
Classic.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. And for some reason, it was obviously my fault.
Oh, in your parents' eyes.
Yeah, because I was sort of
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, the youngest can do no wrong.
yeah, right? That's why I keep saying that. Like, he was always like telling on me. Anyway. And my parents would say, well, he was telling on you because you were hurting him. I was like, well, telling is telling. Anyways, I think we were in a park, and I don't remember how old we were. We were like maybe 10, 12. I have no idea. And I remember we were like playing with some people, or like some other kids. I don't know if we were friends or not. But I'm gonna assume we weren't, because I don't remember seeing them again. And we were playing together. We were like sort of like climbing a wall. And I don't remember what happened, but I think one of them pushed him. And he obviously fell. I'm not sure if he was like crying or not. I was like, I'm not gonna have any of this. And like something sort of like changed in me. And I went up to the guy and I started like beating him a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You meanie.
Yeah, I know, right? I think he might have lost his breath for like a second. his parents weren't too happy when they came to us.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very different, it's a very interesting thing, this relationship with your brother. Well,
Yes.
not your, like in general.
In general, yeah.
One obviously, so that happened.
Yeah.
You saw him, and then obviously next, I'm guessing it was the funeral.
Yeah.
So how did that affect you? So you made a you connected with reality when you saw the coffin.
Mm.
How did that affect you days, weeks, months after that? Because I also didn't realize you when you were just speaking a second ago, you were saying you're not even living with your parents. You lived with some flatmates.
Mm.
That I didn't know. So how did life go on from then?
So I moved back in with my parents for a bit, just because it was easier. Um, uh, I mean, it was such a bizarre time, and it is a really and me and my brother had a really typical relationship, like you've just described, and it's honestly, we used to drive my parents mad because we were continuously fighting. But I literally had like an identical story to what you just described, in that, we were holidaying somewhere and he was going down, we were taking turns going down this slide with sacks on, and this random other kid was there smoking, and we were just ignoring him. And then when my brother went up to the top of the slide, we had been stacking all the sacks up in front so that we could like slide down and burst through them. And anyway, I had just stacked them all up and got out of the way, and this kid came over and tried to start setting fire to the bags and was going, "Shh, don't say, don't tell your brother," like trying to set fire to them. And I didn't know how to respond, and something in me clicked the same way that you described, and I went over and stamped them out. And then he came through like completely unaware, and then I tried to said like, "Come on, let's go," and this kid started basically pushing my brother around, and I was like, "What the hell?" So I didn't go and punch him because I'm too much of a wimp. I'm not very good at confrontation. So instead, I just picked up handfuls of gravel and stones and just lobbed them at him and said, "Leave my brother alone! Leave my brother alone!" And my dad did find him later down the line, and yeah. So my dad didn't punch him, but my dad did throw him to the floor and said, "If you ever do anything like that to my children again, I will find you." So yeah, but I think there is that interesting dynamic and interesting relationship between brothers, isn't there? Where it's like you can beat them up, but nobody else can. It's like a sacred bond. Like there's an understanding that you can beat each other up and you can bully each other, but if anybody else gets in the way of that, then you will be, yeah. So yeah, I think it was just really difficult. It's really difficult looking back on those times to try and sort of like communicate how I felt, because it was also overwhelming that you don't really, I don't know, you don't really feel anything. And you don't really express much either. I mean, the whole situation, the whole dynamics in the family play into it as well. My mum, I think some of the main emotions I was feeling probably were anger, but interestingly not at the offenders, because at this point in time I didn't know the offenders. The anger for me was actually towards my mum, and it was actually stemming from a place of, why can you cry and I can't? why are you getting attention and sympathy and understanding and I'm not? Because she used to cry all the time. Obviously, her son's just been murdered. But because she cried, because she displayed her emotions, people would comfort her. They would support her if when further down the line, when we started going back into our places of work, if she cried, she'd be told she should go home. And I never cried, mainly because when we were leaving my nan's on the first night, she said to me, she pulled me to one side, she said, "Be strong for your parents, don't let them see you cry." Very old school approach. So I spent a lot of time like hiding myself away, choking back tears if I ever felt myself getting upset. And I think that kind of left me with this bit of an inability to cry. Had to be like quite significant for me to cry. And that caused problems because that meant that, you know, like I would laugh at inappropriate things. I would laugh in inappropriate situations. So if somebody was being angry with me, or if something really sad happened, I would laugh, and then I'd had to like explain, God, why did I laugh? Sorry, you know, I don't know. It caused a lot of emotional confusion for me, I think. But the anger towards my mum was very much, you know, a misplaced emotion, because as a sibling, you just fade into the background. You know, nobody really considers you as a victim or as somebody that needs some support. And I think that's quite a common thing. You know, we were part of a bereavement support group, and they had a siblings section that didn't actually do very well, because I think adult parents, and parents were the founders of this group, they just don't understand, and you can't understand what it's like for a sibling to lose a sibling. It's a very different thing. Society treats you differently, judges things differently. The sympathy goes to the parents, the support goes to the parents. So siblings find comfort and support through other means. So for me, it was Lloyd's friends, my friends, reminiscing about the past, talking about naughty stories that we'd both got up to, and, you know, sort of, yeah, celebrating his life. So therefore, I didn't have an interest in seeking a counsellor, or, you know, I didn't get any support through normal forms. Yeah, so I think, yeah, emotions all over the place. Yeah, difficult time, really.
And that's one thing that I guess you're mentioning here about what's happening, what's going on with your family. in in an interview, I think you also said that Christmas was never the same. Family would gather and everyone would think about it in the back of their heads. So I guess part of that was just exactly what you mentioned with your mom. Was there anything else at family gatherings or that was going on?
I mean, well, so yeah, I mean, when we used to have, particularly around Christmas and Boxing Day, we used to have quite big family get-togethers, like close family, extended family, and that stopped straight away. That never happened again, and has never happened since, because it was always like there's somebody missing. But even close family, there was always somebody missing. So the family that were quite close and used to sort of gather together quite frequently, we just stopped doing that, because it was too hard, I guess, for my parents.
Wouldn't normally a moment like this be an opportunity for the family to actually get together, not do the opposite of what you just described?
I mean, so we got together, of course, for the trial, the funeral, all of that sort of stuff. But I think because it didn't happen for a couple of years, everybody makes alternative plans.
Oh.
And then it's very difficult to, especially if there's a hesitancy from my parents to want to get the family together, because everybody used to go around my parents' house. So they didn't want to have all the family round because of the reminder that there's somebody missing. And so obviously the rest of the family make other plans, and then eventually the new traditions of they go round the other half of the family's house for Christmas, or they have their own Christmas, or whatever it is. Over a couple of years, traditions change.
I see. Next up would be, I guess, the trial or finding out, because you said leading up to the funeral, you didn't know who the people who had done this. You don't know anything about them. So later on you found out, I'm guessing. How did you find out about that?
So, yeah, I mean, like, obviously through the media, I discovered what they looked like just from their mugshots.
So wait a second, you didn't even get a call from the police?
Oh, yeah, the police told us, but in terms of
Oh.
connecting faces,
Oh, okay,
because
so
obviously I'd never seen them, so I'd heard of their names. But I think it's very difficult. I think I'm quite a visual person, so for me, just a name means nothing. I had no feeling or emotion attached to that. So then, like, going to trial, they were there in the dock. The justice system in this country leaves a lot to be desired. Even like right down to the setup of a court. Like the Exeter Court is a pretty new court, fairly newly built.
before you continue with that, you're talking with someone who, so I come from Romania,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying that, I'm saying that because I don't know, I barely know how a Romanian court looks like, let alone a British court. The only court I know, the only layout for a court that I might know about is an American one, and that's just because of TV.
Yeah, okay.
So I can't even think about how a court in here would look like.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, like there was. So there's an area for the jury. There's obviously the judge. There's obviously the main floor area, which is where all the desks for the councils are and stuff. And then there's a public gallery, and then there's the box for the defendants. And obviously a stand for people to give evidence. But nowhere for the family. Nowhere at all. So the only place that the family could sit is in a public gallery, which obviously has the families of some of the offenders, which also has the press, which also has whoever the hell wants to come along and watch a trial, because it's a public thing. And this gallery is no bigger than the room we're in at the moment. It was ridiculous.
Wow.
So they end up creating a separate space for the family by putting a load of chairs between the public, between the box holding the defendants and the jury. And because we're close to the jury, so we've got to walk past the defendants, but we're not allowed to look at the defendants. So we're briefed before we go in. You mustn't make eye contact with the defendants, and you mustn't make eye contact with the jury, because if you do that, then you can throw the trial out, because it would be classed as you've prejudiced the trial. So basically you're walking to these chairs that are there, the jury's there, the box is there, and you've literally you can't look at anybody other than that's the chair I'm going to. So you got this horrendous trial unfolding, your emotions are all over the place, and the justice system in this country, that's the welcome to the justice system of the UK. We're going to set this court up so that the traumatized family can walk straight past the defendants, run the risk of prejudicing the trial by looking at the jury and throwing the whole thing out. It's just shocking.
And I can't even begin to think. It's so easy to just give them a look, like passing by. Like you walk down the street and you like look at things randomly. You don't even realize it until you sometimes do. And in this case, they would throw the whole thing out. So like, tell me this: who is someone in charge in the court? Is someone there in charge of like saying, "I'm gonna watch them to see if they've given them a look"? Like how would you?
Yeah. So I don't. So we're warned not to do it. but ultimately, I think you'd have to be really picking bones in terms of like, I think their barristers would have to make a big thing of it.
At any point, did
But
that happen?
no, it didn't. But the interesting thing is, of course, is that I mean, because the evidence was overwhelming, so I mean, they weren't going to lose. But I think if the trial was, you know, if there was any like doubt, then potentially they could have used it. I don't know. I don't know. I just thought the whole thing was atrocious. But that's, just putting the family sandwiched between the offenders and the jury and told not to look at either in case you prejudice the case, which then would mean that a retrial has to happen.
So what do you even look at? Like, what, you're there sat down. What do you look at? The judge?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, thankfully the jury. So, in theory, the box should be empty, and the jury shouldn't be seated until the judge is there or the court's in session. So the idea was that we would be seated first, then everybody else would come in. But more than one occasion, the defendants were already there.
Okay.
So you had to walk past them. I think my auntie did make eye contact with them, and it wasn't a problem. More the fact that my auntie was like, I can't believe it. I just walked past one of them and they smirked at me. It's like, yeah.
Okay, so trial starts. You sort of see the offenders on TV.
Yeah.
Obviously, the police tells you beforehand. Is there anything at the trial that you didn't expect or that you found out?
Well, I think it was so when they open the trial, they give like an opening statement of like to set the scene. It is very much like a drama, and basically we had to listen to like a blow by blow account of what happened to my brother on the night, and that was really really hard because it was described in graphic detail because it's supposed to shock the jury, to say this is what we're dealing with. And they basically said that like Lloyd was innocently walking back from this birthday party, and simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, one of the defendants took it upon themselves to start this fight, and call his friends back. And the friends that came back, one picked up a wooden parking sign and wielded it like an axe and brought it down on his head, hitting him so hard over the head that there was pieces of hair and flesh embedded in the wooden ply sign. So obviously plywood's layers of wood, and within the layers of wood there was pieces of hair and flesh embedded in it because he was hit so hard with it. And then he was hit a further time when he was on the ground defenseless. As I said, he was stamped on, kicked in the face like a footballer taking a penalty shot, is the terms they used, and kicked and stamped on. Yeah. So that was quite a harrowing opening statement to hear, because up until that point, we weren't really aware of the exact details as to what had happened. So yeah, it was interesting.
That happened over 20 something years ago. Well, over 20. That event was 20 years ago. You seem to remember the words that were said quite well.
Oh yeah, well, I think they are a bit ingrained in you, but yeah, the words "kicked in the head like a footballer taking a penalty shot" definitely sticks with me, and hit so hard that there were over the head that there was pieces of hair and flesh embedded in the wood sticks with me. And yeah, and the sign being wielded like an axe also sticks with me.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's pretty graphic imagery, description.
I don't know much about how a trial would play in this country, but did at any point the two offenders take the stand and give a no?
No, so there was actually three. So there was so 4 or 5 people that were arrested on the following morning. one for sure was charged with affray instead of murder.
What's a fray?
So basically, getting into a fight.
Okay.
Yeah, like I don't know, but basically, yeah, he got into a fight. He was fighting amongst his friends, and he happened to be there, but he left before the murder took place. So he had been tried separately for affray, and that was all done and dusted. And then there was 3 that were charged with joint enterprise. So this is another thing that really is, just highlights what an amazing justice system we have. So the law of joint enterprise was brought in for the purposes of gang crime, basically. So the idea being that if you are a part of a gang or a group of people and somebody in your group gets involved in a crime, then you don't have to actually be there to be charged. So the idea being that if there's a gang and they attack another gang and you happen to be in that gang and you happen to be in the area, then you have facilitated this attack. So it was designed to take down gangs, basically. The idea being with Lloyd's case is that 3 people attacked Lloyd. As a result of the attack, Lloyd died. So, but you can't say that it was the sign that killed him, the kicking in the face like a footballer taking a penalty shot that killed him, or whether it was the guy that was kicking and punching him in the stomach. So therefore they said, well, actually, because one of Lloyd's friends tried to stop one of the guys and one of the other guys actually tried to stop this friend helping, he then facilitated the continued attack. So they are basically saying that because of the actions of all 3 of you, Lloyd died, and therefore we're charging you with joint enterprise because it doesn't matter which one of you delivered the fatal blow, you all contributed. But the judge didn't understand that and nearly threw the case out to restart. But instead they went ahead with the case and they tried them all. It was very weird. Tried them all individually for murder. But then the problem with the murder charge, we're really lucky we got a murder conviction, to be fair, because the difference between murder and manslaughter is intent. So if you...
Which one is intent? Murder or manslaughter?
Murder.
Murder is intent, okay.
Yeah, so you've got to demonstrate that there was an intention to murder and not just to harm. And usually, and it's premeditation, so normally it's, did they go out that night with the intention of murdering somebody? So is there any evidence that they planned it? Is there any evidence that they were packing weapons or anything like that?
Okay.
Because if there isn't, then you can't really get a conviction for murder. It would be manslaughter because it just happened that he died as a result of the injuries. So we were quite lucky that they managed to, be sentenced for murder, because honestly, I don't think that you could say that by any stretch of the imagination they went out that evening with an intention of killing somebody. You could easily say that, well, I mean, if you're stamping on somebody's head and hitting them around the head with a wooden sign, then surely there is intent, but I don't think it would cross the threshold for intent as defined by the law.
So how did the trial, or sort of, yeah, how did the trial play around intent? How did they prove intent in this situation?
I don't think they really did, to be honest. I mean, it was all a bit of a mess, to be honest. I don't think they really did prove intent. I think they just proved that the actions of these 3 people caused Lloyd's death, and for some reason that ended up in a guilty verdict for 2 and an innocent verdict for 1, which is very annoying, because I think if they had gone in without a murder charge, or if they'd gone in with a murder charge for 2 of them and another charge for the 3rd person, he would have gone to prison too for a lesser charge. But because the option was guilty or not guilty to murder, he walked free from the dock, and he's a particularly unpleasant individual who comes from a particularly unpleasant family who have a long-standing generational history of assaulting people, of crime, of all of this sort of like stuff you associate with that sort of person. And you know, this is a sort of person that father-son bonding time is to go and beat up an ex-boyfriend of one of their sisters. Yeah, of one of their sisters' ex-boyfriends. They're going to go and beat him up.
How do you know all of this?
Because of the media, and Taunton's quite a small place. And they have and he's since been in prison for assault. So yeah.
So
I think actually as well, my dad went to school or knew one of the guys' dads from school. So they were always that sort of, everybody knew of the people by that name. So, yeah.
So one of them walks. Sorry, we got
You got
a
a welcome
guest.
appearance.
I have to take her now. I have to.
Well, at least she's dried off on my
hello.
on my coat, so you know you've got a dry dog.
Wow.
Hello.
I never thought this would happen. This is so cute. Right.
Oh, she's gonna steal the show now.
Yeah, I know.
That's
right?
it. Now it's just gonna be like everybody's just gonna switch off to whatever we're saying and just hone in on doggy cam.
Yeah. Her name is Tilly for anyone watching.
You gonna say hello?
How old is she?
She's 9.
She's 9.
You've got to look over here. Let's say hi to the cameras.
Oh.
Good girl.
So one of them walks off innocent.
Yeah.
And they are to get convicted.
Yes.
At which point did you get, well, no. Did you get to talk with any of them?
No.
No.
No. So they got convicted of murder, which is an automatic life sentence. But in this country, life at that time didn't mean life. So they're given a minimum term, and their minimum term was 12 and 13 years respectively, of which they've served their term now. So they're actually out. They're not in prison anymore. But the life element of it means that they've got to check in with parole every single year for the rest of their life. And if they ever commit another crime, they go straight back to prison. Well, in theory, I mean, we know that the justice system in this country would never uphold that. But that is the principle of a life sentence. Yeah. So yeah, they're out.
Okay, I see, Adam. So I guess one of the things, Tilly's wanting to change.
Yeah,
There you go.
Okay. Change of person, is it? Okay.
So one of the things I mentioned at the beginning was, even though this tragic event happened quite early on in your life, you were 19 at the time, from that moment on, your life sort of changed.
Yeah.
I guess the next thing I would like to explore with you is about that change. And more specifically, you say it yourself. You said yourself, especially with your mom. She was crying, she was getting all the attention. Family gatherings, she did, well, not necessarily her, but I guess your parents didn't want that many people around anymore because it would be a constant reminder about Lloyd and what had happened. So I guess this goes to my argument of not that many people do what you have done. And one of the things I mentioned at the beginning was the charity. You went on and created a massive charity out of it that has been going on for 20 years. The charity is called Stand Against Violence. Ta-da. And so I guess what I want to begin with this line of questioning is, I guess, why did you even think of doing that? When other people would just, I guess, grieve like your parents, you decide to do something completely different.
So I think it's part of my personality. I have always been the sort of person that will get on my high horse, and if something doesn't seem right to me, if something doesn't seem fair, I mean, I'm the person that started a petition in primary school to get the lunch lady removed from her post because she was I thought she was not very nice. Well, actually, most of the kids felt that she wasn't very nice, and I was the one that was gonna get her removed. So I started a petition, and I think I was, well, maybe, God, 7, 8 years old. So I've always been the sort of person that if I see something that offends me, whether that's injustice or somebody being just not a nice person, I'll try and do something to make a stand against that. And I think this is a prime example, well, the worst kind of example of where something awful and unjust has happened, that has led to the loss of a young life for no reason other than mindless violence. And also I needed to, just have something to focus on. So one of my friends who'd come to pay me a visit said, why don't you,
And sorry to interrupt, what year was this as well? So 2005 happened.
2005.
Okay, so okay, I say same year your friend comes to you. Okay, continue from there.
Yeah, and we were just chatting, and she said, somebody really needs to do stuff about this. It just isn't acceptable that this is allowed to happen. And I was like, yeah, you're right, somebody does. And like, I'm also one of these people that gets a million ideas in my head, and is maybe a bit of a 5-minute wonder person as well. But I always like to go from 0 to 100 really quickly. So like I started drawing out a concept for a logo literally on the day with this friend, and yeah, it just kind of went from there. Like I raised it with a few people, like what could we do, and I went for a ride along with the police because I thought, well, I need to do a little bit of, like, understand a little bit what to campaign against, or what should I be doing, because I can't just say campaign against people being murdered, because that's a huge topic. So I went out with the police because I think the police initially wanted to support me, and initially they wanted to steer me in a direction, to funnel my whatever, my grief or my passion to do something. So they took me out for this ride along, and anyway, I went out with this police officer, and we drove around Taunton and we drove around Bridgewater on Friday night. I think it was a Friday night. And the main thing I observed was there was 2 instances where a fight was clearly gonna break out, and this astute police officer recognized the warning signs because he was an old hat copper, pulled the car over. He went off right into the middle of this group that was starting to spark off, basically sent the 2 different groups in different directions, single police officer on his own, but managed to just literally nip it in the bud because he recognized the testosterone fueled men puffing their chest up as something's going to kick off there. So he went over, sent them in their different directions, and that was it. And that happened on 2 separate occasions on the same night in 2 different towns. So in my mind, the answer was really simple. You just needed more police officers out on the street that could recognize the early warning signs and break it up before it got out of hand. So I decided that I would do a petition to take to government to ask for more police to be present on the streets at peak times, so evenings and weekends basically. So Friday, Saturday nights out in the town, a stronger police presence. But because that was then political, the police couldn't support me with it. And unfortunately, they actually went the opposite way and made life very difficult for me, which I was sadly surprised about. But yeah, so that's kind of what kicked it off, was wanting to do something, recognizing that an increased police presence, which obviously is very well known, will deter crime, and early intervention will deter crime. But yeah, we managed to collect 26,000 signatures over a course of 2 weeks, and went to Downing Street, handed them in, had a meeting with the minister. The minister wrote back and basically said, thanks for coming to see me. We're not going to do any of what you've requested, but here's what we are going to do. And there was a whole list of nonsense that showed they hadn't listened to a thing that I'd said.
So wait a second. So you tried to petition for more police on the streets in Taunton.
Well, generally
Generally,
everywhere. Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
You didn't get that support from the police because it was political. At that point, you already knew what you wanted to stand against violence. I'm guessing at that point you sort of knew.
So yeah, I mean, it was the campaign for Lloyd originally.
Okay, so through the campaign for Lloyd, you wanted to get more police generally on the streets. Unsuccessful.
Yeah.
So you were just talking about getting signatures. What were the signatures for? What were you trying to petition for?
Calling for more police on the streets.
Okay, so it was still the same thing, but this time going to Downing Street.
Yeah, so I delivered the once we'd collected the petition, all the signatures, 26,000 people of Taunton calling for more police on the street. I took those to Downing Street and handed them in, never to be seen again.
Oh, I understand. Okay.
Yeah. But, like looking back on it now, and as I'm talking to you about, yes, I was 19 and massively naive. I mean, can you imagine the government on 26,000 signatures saying, yes, let's increase funding to the police by so many million just because you've collected 26,000 signatures in order to get that level of police officers? I mean, it was never going to happen. But yeah, I mean, you felt like you were doing something, I suppose, but I mean, that was where it began. And I was really disheartened to get something back from the government, basically saying thanks but no thanks. And I kind of didn't know where to go next from that point. And I was approached like maybe a month or so prior to this by a reverend from a local church who had arranged for the Anne Frank and You exhibition to come to Taunton, to the Methodist Church. And basically the Anne Frank and You exhibition, which was run by the Anne Frank Trust, is all about bringing Anne Frank's story into the modern age, so that it keeps the story alive, but also it makes it relatable to modern day issues. I won't get political because it's all of it up in the air with that at the moment, isn't it? But so it was looking at how prejudice and discrimination can lead to hatred and extermination of people based on their differences. So it's a really, really good exhibition, and he campaigned to get it to come to Taunton. And he saw the local incident with my brother and thought that actually, that is a modern day issue of street violence. He wrote to me and said, do you want to be involved? Could you do a speech at the opening night? And when I got the letter through, I was like, I don't know what this has got to do with anything. So I just ignored it. And then when I was like just wondering what the next move was, one day I found this letter just poking out from under a load of paperwork, and reread it and thought, oh, okay, well, I'll just phone this guy and see what he's talking about. And basically explained everything. I met him, he was really nice, and he just wanted me to tell Lloyd's story, and it was really early on, really thinking about it. But anyway, I said I would, and I kind of at that point I was trying to think like, how do I communicate this to an audience of people in a way that is impactful, that isn't just me talking, and boring people. So what I did is I created a PowerPoint, and in the PowerPoint I put sort of photos of me and Lloyd and the family like growing up, and then I put photos of news articles of his murder, and then there was a memorial site that had lots of comments from family and friends, so I took snippets from that. And basically the whole point of my talk was, how would you feel if this happened to you? How would you feel if this was your brother? How would you feel if this was your best friend, or a member of your family? It was about trying to create that empathy. It's that common saying of putting yourself in another person's shoes, and talking about how like my experience, and then trying to get people to relate to that in their own way. And basically it was really effective. Loads of people cried. We used some of the music that we played at Lloyd's funeral, which was quite poignant. One of them being Oasis, Stop Crying Your Heart Out, which obviously is quite a powerful song anyway. And yeah, it was really effective. And basically after that, the reverend at the church said, oh, you should really take this into schools. And I was like, yeah, I don't think so.
The reverend said to you.
Yeah, because he thought it would be really powerful for kids to see it.
And just to pause there for a second, when you and I were talking, you were telling me this exact story, but what you're not saying now is that you didn't consider yourself to be a good speaker. Am I right in saying that, or am I just making things up?
No, I didn't. No. So yeah, I was. I think. Well, the funny thing was, I was so nervous when I was talking. This is like an audience of 300 people, and I was so nervous when I was talking, that I started getting a runny nose. I don't know why. Like it was like I was having like this hot flash and this nerves, and I started having like a sniffly nose. And I think it worked quite well, probably because I think they thought I was getting really upset, and I wasn't. I was just so nervous for some reason. My nose was running. I was like all the time, like, and I think they thought I was crying. So it wasn't a problem. But yeah, I was really nervous, and the thought of talking to kids terrified me, because I remember being in secondary school and sitting in an assembly and all the naughty kids taking the mick out of the person that was being the guest speaker. And I was like, I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm talking about something as personal as that, and being so vulnerable in front of kids, that can be cruel. Anyway, he encouraged me, and I did go to a few schools. Started with a primary school. I was so nervous. I was shaking in front of a load of like 9-year-old kids, and did a few secondary schools. But I had to be interviewed, so he would come in with me, and he would ask me questions, and that was the only way I could talk in front of these kids. And then one day he said, look, why don't you just write a little speech, just something small that you can say at the end, like when you're summing up. Because he used to sort of like say a little story as well, and he was very good, because he was a vicar, wasn't he? They're trained and naturally good at drawing a lesson out of something, communicating a message. So anyway, I started reading off this piece of paper, just at the end, and then eventually, as time went on, I got more used to it. he arranged a gig for me at one of the schools, and just as I was about to go in, he phoned me and said, "I'm really sorry, I'm sick, I'm not going to make it, but you've got this, you can do it." And like, I look back on it now and I'm like, he so did that deliberately. That was like, he was not sick at all. He was like, how the hell am I going to get him to finally spread his wings and just get on with it? So, well, I'm pretty sure that's what it was anyway. So anyway, I did it and it was fine. And I did spread my wings and I did carry on. And then the PowerPoint was very, very clunky, it was a very big file, and it was all sort of, it wasn't a click on, it was you push play and the whole slide runs through. And it started getting really glitchy and embarrassing. So I was like, right, I need to do something different. What am I going to do? And I thought, right, I want to go big or go home. I'm going to create a film. Like when I was in school, I did work experience with a filming company, and I've always been quite artistic in a way. So I was like, we're going to film it. We're going to do a load of interviews and we're going to do a reconstruction. And I had no idea how I was going to do it. I was like, interviews, easy, can do that. But how am I going to film it? And I managed to get like some college students, managed to get the people that I did my work experience with to commit their resources for free to do the filming, the editing. And we were going to use dummies for the attack. And one of my friends at the time was a makeup artist. She'd done theatrical cosmetics and stuff like that for her for one of her college courses. So she like that was her thing. So she was gonna. So we had all these different people with different skill sets, amateurs, professionals, all coming together to make this thing. But we just didn't know how we were going to make a convincing reconstruction of the assault. And we were thinking we'll film it from a bit of a distance and we'll use dummies. And you know that that's not going to be very good. You know it's going to be rubbish. So I just thought, I'm just going to phone a stunt coordinator. I emailed a few, and anyway, I found this lady called Abby Collins, and I emailed her and basically said, this is what I'm trying to do. And I was wondering if you would be able to advise or support how we could do this effectively. And she basically got back to me within like 24 hours and said, I have to help you. This, you've really touched me. I want to help you. I am going to find five other stunt professionals, and we are going to come to Taunton and we are going to do the reconstruction for you. So I had 5 stunt actors and a stunt coordinator. I think at that time a stunt coordinator was about £700 a day, and stunt actors were about £500 a day. Contacted a local ambulance service. They gave us 2 paramedics and their brand spanking new ambulance. Contacted a local builder's merchant. They gave us a cherry picker crane so that we could do an aerial shot. Literally had everything, and the only budget we had was a donation from a local councillor towards the cause. It was like a community fund of £700, and I think literally that paid for some of the sort of things like food and drink for people. And so we had a little budget, but everybody worked for free, and we made this proper reconstruction, mixed it all up with interviews, keeping the underpinning message the same. The objective is to create connection with the audience, to get them to empathize, to get them to be able to see, oh yeah, actually that, how would I feel if that happened to my loved one? And I think I managed to achieve that, and we created this film that we still use today. And I think I showed it to a school, and the teacher that was there was basically really inspired by it all. And I reached out to her at some point later because we got on really well when I met her, and I think I met her a couple of times. I reached out to her and said, look, would you consider writing a lesson, like a lesson plan to incorporate this, to make it an actual standalone lesson, the film and a workshop? And she said, yeah, that's fine, I'll do that. And she was trained in PSHE specifically, as well as her teaching degree. And that was basically the birth of our education program offer to schools, was the video and the lesson plan. And the lesson was all about empathy. It was all about, you launch straight in with the film because it's a bit of a shock factor. It captures everybody's attention, but also it elaborates and it explains what happened and the impact and what the aftermath was and the impact it had on everybody. And then you get them all to break up into groups and to get them to put themselves in the shoes of somebody that was affected and to brainstorm all their thoughts and feelings. And then you invite discussion and feedback, and it's really effective. Like, the kids engage incredibly well. And we've run it in like youth offending teams, and we've had like these frequent offenders of violence, kids who go through the youth offending system over and over again. We've gone there, we've done 2 sessions with them, and we checked in like a couple of years later, and none of them had re-offended.
As a result of your workshop?
Well, I don't know. Could be. I mean, we were the only thing that changed on the rehabilitation program. But obviously, like with everything in government, in the police, the youth offending services, they will never allow anybody externally to take any credit for, especially a little old me, a little old, like, there's a lot, there was so many obstacles from people that should really know better and be helping with these things to do better, but they weren't. So we had lots of obstacles. But yeah, they went, I think it was like a 2-hour session times 2. And usually, because like the youth offending workers were shocked, because usually the kids are literally counting down the minutes to their cigarette break, and they got so engrossed in what we were talking about that they didn't even ask for their cigarette break. They went straight through the full 2 hours.
Wow.
With no break. And it was like, wasn't that we didn't, they literally wouldn't shut up because they had so much to say. And I think that's one of the really interesting things, is the people that respond more strongly to the video and to the story are usually the individuals who are more likely to commit to perpetrate the violence that took Lloyd's life.
So the people who respond the most are also the people who would be more likely to do what those people have done to Lloyd.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is across the board. If you go into a school and run a workshop, the kids that get most angry and worked up about the injustice, how dare those kids do what they did to Lloyd? How dare Adam go around talking and not going out there and seeking vengeance? How, they're so angry about the situation and the injustice, and they don't understand how I can just talk about it and not want to go and beat these people up with a hammer or something. But those are the kids that the teachers come up to us at the end and say, I cannot believe you got that response out of that kid, because that kid is the sort of kid that I could see being in prison in 5 years' time for having attacked somebody. It's really quite fascinating, especially the work that we did with the youth offending team, because we did another session with another youth offending team somewhere like in another town, and we had like this kid. They did go for their break, but this kid was like, I didn't think he was engaging at all, and I was like, we've lost this kid. Like, he's not engaging at all. He was swinging back on his chair, not interested. And at the end of the class, at the end of the session, when all the others disappeared off, he stayed behind. And he came up to me and he said, yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I do rap. I was just wondering if I could rap about like Lloyd and like Lloyd's story. And I was like, yeah, sure. And like he said, I'll send you the lyrics and everything before I do anything. I was like, okay. And honestly, the lyrics, he had listened to everything that was said. He had digested it, he had processed it. There was evidence of abstract thought. Like, he really had taken in everything he had seen, even though I didn't even think he was listening. And he had processed it in a way that it was just really impressive. It was really impressive to see how even somebody who I thought wasn't paying any attention at all obviously was deeply impacted by the story.
I want to find out more about how you've taken this education program and then started a charity. But before we go there, just because you've opened this up, I could find myself in a similar situation where someone, say a charity, comes and gives a talk, and I'm like, cool, I'm just gonna switch off for the next 10, 20, 30 minutes. I don't need this. I'm not gonna care. It's a one-time thing. There's no consequence to me not listening. So I'm gonna be on my phone. I'm gonna do something else. So in those, because you've got the experience, so like, how do you engage with someone, a kid, who has lost that interest? The story you've just described, thankfully, the kid didn't, and he proved it to you at the end. But what happens in those situations where people, like me, for example, would just switch off?
So it's the video that does it. So we do other lessons as well, all around topics that contribute to the cycle of violence, whether that's substance misuse, whether it's bullying, whether it's domestic abuse. We cover it all, and we do it with real life stories and hard-hitting videos. And it's one of the reasons that our work wouldn't we applied to the PSHE Association to have our work accredited as PSHE approved, and they wouldn't accredit us because they said that it was we were in breach of one of their rules, which was not to cause distress through the content that's being delivered. And when our work was evaluated, somebody in the audience, one of the students in the audience, was visibly crying. So they said, you've caused distress, therefore your materials are not suitable to be PSHE accredited. And alongside that, we've also had some people in educational, usually not in the schools. Schools usually love it because the schools are real. They're working with the kids on the ground and they know what the kids need. It's always the purse string holders in government that have this opinion. So the far removed PSHE Association, the local education authorities that sit in county halls, they look at the video and they go, oh, that's really hard hitting. I don't like it. I don't like that it's hard hitting. That's a shock tactic. And I used to find myself a lot in this situation where I had to try and educate these people who should be a bit more astute and aware and credible than they were, where I had to sort of say, no, the difference between our stuff and a shock tactic is a shock tactic leaves you shocked and traumatized, such as the drink driving adverts, the think drink driving or think speed adverts. you'll be happily watching TV, and an advert will come on, and we can all remember at least one of those adverts. So in some respects, they work from sticking with you, whether they are effective at reducing drink driving or whatever, I don't know. But something horrific happens, and then it finishes. That's caught your attention. That's a shock. Yeah, okay, that's shock tactics. But the film starts with a scene that captures your attention because it is a shock, but it then unravels the whole story, and it talks about what Lloyd was like as a person. It then shows you what happened to Lloyd, pulling no punches, throwing punches. It doesn't sugarcoat anything, and then it goes into like how that's impacted the family, how that's impacted other people within the community. So it's a really holistic, well-rounded film, all tied up in 11 minutes. And then we do workshop activity around it to really sort of get the discussion going. So actually, it's a really effective tool, but there are unfortunately people out there who see that as a shock tactic.
Yeah, I think that's a bit stupid. I think there's loads of people who are in those higher positions that they don't understand what the people on the ground actually need. Go to a company, any company, and you'll see that probably what will happen is the executives will be absolutely detached from the people who actually interact with the customers, and that's when those companies started to fail. Or if you look at politics, if you look at some of the probably stupid policies that are coming out, you can say, how are you even thinking of voting or like creating something like it doesn't align with what we actually need. But as you were talking there, so I'm guessing the major thing from what you're saying is the shock coming from the video that will get people engaged.
Captures the attention, like instantly. Like, I mean,
Okay.
So there, you know what? So you remember being in school. People filter into the classroom, and they've just come off lunch break. They're chatting. They're not interested. They're not even looking at people at the front of the classroom. They're literally just chatting amongst themselves, shoving each other, laughing. I have just played the film. I have shouted over the top of them, like, "Hi, today I'm talking to you about violence." No response. A couple of them might shut up, but the majority just carry on barging each other. So I'm like, "We're going to play a film now. There are scenes of violence in it." And they're like a bit like, "Okay. If you find it too traumatic, you're free to leave the room or look away. Just listen if you can." They're like, "Oh, okay, this will be maybe a bit interesting." And then I literally just play the video, and the first scene is a freeze frame of the actor that plays Lloyd lying dead on the ground with his face covered in blood. That is the first image that they see. And then, and in the background is the audio recording of the 999 call. Basically, like people panicking, screaming, calling for help. You know, somebody's being killed. And as soon as that comes up, they shut up. And then they watch the rest of the film. And then by the end of the film, yeah, there's some of them are visibly upset. Others are raging. and then you start to unpick it through the activities afterwards, where you get them to sort of like, and we ask, we explain in more detail what happened, we let them ask questions, and then we do breakout activities. So yeah, that's how we get their attention.
So by that point, everyone's captured.
Yeah, without the video. And that's why we always, with all of our workshops, we focus on empathy-based activities, real life stories, and we don't sugarcoat a pill.
Okay, so let's talk about charity. So you've done this educational material. How do you actually start a charity, and what's happening from that point on?
How do you start a charity? You start a charity with £5,000. Did you know that?
Now I do.
You cannot register in this country, or you certainly couldn't when we registered, as a charity unless you had £5,000, which I thought was insane, because the whole point of a charity is they don't have money. So I even went into the local charity commission offices and said, how am I supposed to register as a charity and get money from grants if you can't register unless you've got £5,000? And they were like, well, you can't. So I was like, right, okay. But then the guy I was speaking to then did say, but if you've got somebody that can pledge you £5,000, we'll accept it. So I was like, oh, okay. So I just said to my parents, can you just pledge me £5,000? Like, you don't have to give me £5,000, but if for whatever reason it was needed. And they were like, yeah, okay, fine. Like, as long as you don't need it, that's fine. So I opened the charity by saying there was a pledge of £5,000, and they accepted it and opened the charity. But for a long time we were just a campaign. After the failure of the campaign, I decided
Failure in terms of
not getting the result, going to
if you went
government.
down, okay. So this was happening between you going to I
Downing
forgot the name of the
Street
street now. Downing Street, yeah.
Yeah.
Between Downing Street and I guess
and the Anne Frank thing.
the Anne Frank thing. Okay.
Yeah. And then I decided I was going to start a website, and the website was going to, we needed a name for the website. The website was going to be called Stand Against Violence, because it was going to be a crime reporting website where every single week I went through the local paper and I would do a heat map of reported crime in Taunton, and I would put a marker on the map for where the crime was and what the crime was, which obviously the police didn't like.
The police didn't like
No.
because you were showing murder that the people didn't want to see.
Oh yeah, you're basically making anything that makes somewhere out to be unsafe. Then the police have to do like every time I did a news interview with the press over anything, they always had to send a police representative who would basically say everything I said was rubbish. And yeah, it was just a constant battle between me and the police. They were awful.
What's great about today, and some people complain about technology, but what's great about technology today is the fact that someone like you can come and show the data. Someone like a policeman or a police officer could come and say that's all of rubbish, but people can then look at the data you have, cross-reference that with what data is on the internet generally available, and make up their own minds. This is such a stupid thing.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing with the police was that obviously they use their own statistics, so Home Office statistics, which is all recorded. I mean, it was back then. It's all recorded crime. So the statistics were always wrong, because there's detected crime and there's recorded crime, and I can't remember which way around it is, but crime is only recorded and therefore stored as data and used as data if there's a conviction, because other than that it's just so detected crime, I believe it was detected crime is like something that's been reported. So and so's raped me, for example, so that's a detected crime. But a reported crime there has to be a conviction. Okay. There has to be a charge pressed. Mm-hmm. So if nothing happens, then so all those cases of, and that's, I chose rape as an example because that's a big thing at the moment, around what's reported, what's not reported. But it's the same principle, that the figures are wrong when you look at police figures, because the police cannot put it down as yes, that was a rape, or yes, that was an assault, unless there's a charge, because otherwise they would be putting down everything. Anybody with a gripe, a neighbour that's complaining about, saying, I don't know, whatever, anything could go down. But what is really effective is hospital data of attendances due to assault. Office for National Statistics, their data is robust, it's unbiased. But also at the time, there was a lot of public health observatories that kept an eye on data and would combine data from all data sources and give a true picture. So I used to quote statistics from hospital episode statistics from ONS, and there was things like the local violence indicator profiles. There was the LAPE, local assault and violence profiles for England or something, and Viper as well.
I
That
see.
was violence indicator profiles.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those have, apart from hospital episode, well, even hospital episode statistics, they've become something else now. But all of them, apart from the ONS, have gone because through the successive governments, they cut all the funding. So now we've really only got ONS, and we've got like the police data, which is still going to be wrong and biased.
Yeah, okay.
But the police absolutely hated that I used to look at other sources for my data. But I mean, like, I won't, you need to look wider for your data.
Absolutely.
To get a
So-
true picture.
Going back to you got a pledge from your parents, you registered the charity. What's next? How do you go? Because this charity has been going on for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think when you and I were talking, you said that most charities don't go on for that long.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Yeah, it started this website, and that's where the charity got its name from. So that was kind of one step in the journey, because that was when it became something. It became an entity, and that's how it was registered. It was registered as Stand Against Violence.
So what's the next step then?
So seeing the impact of the Anne Frank exhibition and seeing the impact that we were having on schools, or I was having on schools, by going and talking, then creating the video and creating the school workshop. At that point, Stand Against Violence had become a charity, and I decided that the charity was going to be about preventing violence through education, because I could see that there was benefit and good response from the schools and from the kids, and I was convinced that that was, our approach to government had failed. We weren't going to get any big policy changes, so therefore what could we do? Well, we could talk about Lloyd, we could teach people, we could educate, we could try and prevent what happened to him from happening to other young people. So in order to form a charity, I had to find some trustees. So we started with a handful of trustees, and no direction, no business plan, no nothing. And just carried on pottering on, like just going into schools when we were asked to go into schools. I went into schools. And then, I don't know, it got to a stage where I just wanted it to be bigger. I wanted to do more. I wanted more schools to get us in. I wanted more people to be exposed. I wanted it to be bigger. And that's when I started like reaching out to organizations who supported charities in terms of developing a business strategy, reaching out to funders, speaking to other people, getting our name out there a bit more. And then at some point we took on a contractor, a freelance teacher, who started going out doing a lot of the workshops. And then slowly but surely it kind of just built up from there, I guess. It's really hard to sort of like really clearly define each stage of progression, but it kind of just evolved into what it is now.
So at which point did you realize, or did you decide, I want this to be bigger? What year was that?
What year was that? I have no idea.
No idea. Okay.
I have no idea. I mean, I think I've probably always been, I'm not a business savvy person at all. And I think I definitely am more like I'm useless at monetizing stuff, useless at it. I'm passionate about doing something and I like the thought of being your own boss and the freedom and all of that sort of thing about running your own enterprise, but I'm terrible at money. Um, so like if somebody goes, oh, I can't really afford that, I'll be like, oh, it's all right, I'll do it for free. You know, so that's what I'm when I say
Okay.
I'm terrible at business, that's where that comes from. So probably perfectly suited for the charity sector. Can't afford that. Fine, we'll get some funding. Oh, we'll do this or we'll do that. And so I think because I've always liked the thought of, you know, my dad had his own business and I saw, you know, the stress, but also the freedom that that could then afford and just being in control, having your own, you know, being able to do what you see fit in your own organization.
So I guess what I'm trying to get to is why were you why did you want it to grow bigger?
To reach more people and because I wanted a legacy for my brother. So I wanted Lloyd's memory to last. And I kind of thought, wouldn't it be great if Stand Against Violence could become like Bernardo's and then, you know, like be this like national, going to international organization.
So up until that, well, what had to change in the organization or within you or within the team you had? I'm making an assumption there was also a team around you apart from the trustees. What had to change in order for that to be accomplished? I'm saying that because in 2021, Somerset went out and said Stand Against Violence started as a local campaign in Somerset, but now delivers national violence prevention workshops to thousands of young people all over the UK. So obviously you've done it, but what had to change for you to grow it from what was a local campaign to a national campaign?
Well, I mean, so we had a business plan, a bit of a strategy, but that was all over the blooming place as well because I just wanted to do everything like as I was saying previously, 0 to 100. And it took me years to really focus down on what we needed to do. But ultimately, when you look at what was working, it was having a freelance teacher going into schools and delivering Lloyd's story. So if we were going to, so basically they were doing it, I was doing it, and the teacher that originally helped us to develop the workshop was also doing it. We were both doing it for free, and then we had somebody helping. So then we thought, well, we'll get another one. So our model of delivery has always been to use freelancers because we can't afford to employ somebody because unfortunately violence is not a very sexy subject. So funders don't like to fund violence prevention. And on top of that, we can't usually take photos of our work because we're in schools working with children. So a lot of funders enjoy fluffy, like, oh, look at the impact our money's had, whereas we can't provide that. And also because we're prevention, we can't say 100 young people have been saved this year because of our work because we can't prove it. So we're very difficult to fund. So using a freelance model meant that it's low risk because you only pay the freelancers for the work they do. So you don't have the risks of employment, you don't have the overheads of employment. They're self-employed, they're working elsewhere, they just go off randomly and do these, you know, we basically give them the materials, train them in it, they would come in with me and watch me deliver it, and then we would supervise them, and then when we were happy they'd go off and do it. And that's the model that grew, and that's the model we've still got now. We've got 25 teachers now, and basically we just recruit teachers and train them in areas where we have demand. So there's quite a lot of demand for our deliveries up north, so across the Midlands. So we've got a couple of teachers up there who are really good, and they go into schools in their area. And then we've got some teachers, we've got some cover in London. cover in Somerset and some of the southwest. We've got some cover in Cornwall. We've got teachers dotted all over the place that we train and then assess.
Which made it national.
Yes.
So you were saying something interesting there about sponsorship and funding. When I looked on your website, standagainstviolence.com.co.uk or
.co.uk.
.co.uk. When I was looking through the website, I saw loads of pictures and articles, and each one of those pictures was mostly you and people not pledging, but giving you massive checks of money. So you were saying a second ago about how because it's not sexy enough, because it's not a popular subject, people would not want to get involved with that. But then I'm looking at your website and I'm seeing all of those pictures. I'm guessing, I'm thinking to myself, is that happening after you going national or before as well?
So a lot of the pictures on the website will be donations from community organisations. So that's a completely different ball game because community organisations, especially if they hear Lloyd's story, they're all local people with kids grown up in the area or maybe in areas similar to Taunton, and they look at it and they connect with it and they go, oh my God, we need to do something. I'm nominating you for Charity of the Year, or I'm nominating you to some local fund, or we're going to do a bake sale for you and raise some money. But if you zoom in on those checks, they'll be really small amounts of money. Maybe there'll be 500, maybe if we're lucky 5,000. But funders, big funders, where you've got the real opportunity to get loads of money that can be given to you over a 3-year period, for example, which could really make a big difference to help us grow, because we could actually maybe employ a couple of teachers to cover regions, which means we wouldn't have to constantly keep chasing our tails. Like because you've got freelancers, you can't demand that they go somewhere. You have to say, look, we've got 5 bookings in this area, can anybody pick them up? And if people can't pick them up, then we've got to negotiate with the school moving the date, which looks unprofessional. Or we've got to pay a teacher from somewhere else in the country accommodation and travel costs to go up there, and then we make a loss because we're trying to protect our reputation. Whereas if we could just employ, say, 3 teachers for each region who would travel however far, we've got consistency, we've got continuity, we know the quality is good, we've got people that we can go to. But in order to do that requires a lot of money, and it's a big risk because employment is always a risk. Okay. The most we've ever got from a single funder is 25 grand. Okay. And that is in 20 years. And that's only happened once. All the other funds we've ever had have been no more than 10 grand.
Okay, I see.
At any one time. So a lot of our average gift from a funder is 5 grand.
Okay.
So if you can imagine the number of funding applications that go in, because only about, especially now post-COVID, maybe 1 in 20 of applications we send out will come back. And I think we make usually around 60 to 70k a year from grants. So hundreds and hundreds of grant applications go out, which are obviously eat into our time. And only a handful come back, 5,000 each, up to the value of 60 to 70k. And the majority of the time it is because it's not something that a lot of funders like a project, something they can go, our money did this. They don't like to give to overheads. They don't like supporting salaries, for example. So you'll see a lot of funders say, we'll fund this, that, and that. We will not fund salaries. So it's almost like they forget that charities need to pay people to work.
I see.
It's a real tricky thing for the third sector, and if there is one thing, if any person that listens to this podcast works for like a big funder, the one thing that really gets me is this complete weird idea that you can't fund a salary. You know, like without our administrator, no data collection happens. You know, there's nobody to scan in and collate all of our feedback. Without our feedback, no funder's going to fund us because they'll be like, who are you? What are you doing? Where's your evidence? So administrator gone, funding's gone. Without our ops manager who does all these applications, no applications are happening. Without our school's education coordinator, no schools will know of our existence. No teachers will be assigned to schools. No bookings will be created. So without these, we have literally 3 part-time members of staff, and without their roles, the charity doesn't happen, or I have to give up everything about my life again, once again, to go and single-handedly run a charity in order to achieve our objective. So it does annoy me that big funders don't acknowledge that. The really, really big funders do acknowledge it, and they will give you a decent amount of money, say once a year for 3 years, and support. But to them, violence isn't sexy enough.
Oh, yeah. It's a from what you're describing is a really tough it's a really tough thing to organize, to be part of, and to manage. And it's stupid that they don't fund the one thing that keeps the charity afloat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. So going back to the question I was asking about what had to change, and you said one thing that had to change was getting more freelance teachers to spread the message out in schools. One thing you also mentioned to me with off camera was that you had to learn how to run the charity as a business.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
So it means not doing things for free, and it means having a plan and a strategy, and growing something in having a business plan, number one. You know, what are we trying to achieve? How are we going to achieve it? Over what time frame? What are our goals? What are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? And how are we going to capitalize on our opportunities? How are we going to mitigate our threats? How are we going to play on our strengths? How are we going to improve our weaknesses? You know, all of these things that if you're just a little community charity, you don't really think about. You just do your thing. But if you're going to get bigger, you need to understand, well, in order to do that, we need to invest this. And if we're going to get a teacher, we need to pay this person. And in order to pay that person, that's a cost. How are we going to how are we going to get that cost back? Education sector is notoriously poorly funded, and that's only got worse. So therefore, we're going to need to find that money from somewhere, and funding is really hard to get. So we can't rely solely on grants. So how do we do it? Well, we'll have a mixed funding model. We will approach schools and hope that the schools will say, yes, we can pay to cover your costs. And then if a school comes back and says, we absolutely don't have the budget for this, we can't afford it, then we can say, actually, we could potentially try and find some funding to offset your costs. What could you afford to pay? It's all, you know, it's that sort of thing. It's like making sure you know what your costs are and how you're going to fund that.
So obviously we could spend a lot of time digging into that, but let me ask you a different question, because firstly, quick one. At which point do you remember, like, sort of like the year when can be like vague, when you started getting more freelance teachers to help you out? Was this, because this was like 2005, was it like 2010, 15?
Yeah, probably more like 15.
15,
maybe.
okay. So that's 10 years after the fact. So between 2005 and 2015, roughly, at that point you are around 29. 29, 30. What I'm getting with is, how do you even, because at 19, you decide to start a charity. Well, you decide to start a campaign, from which point you then moved over to a charity after Downing Street said no. So how did you even learn how to how the freelance model worked. How did you learn how to come with a strategy, how to do I guess, competitor analysis or something of that sort. You just mentioned it. How to get people to, I guess, pledge and support you with money. There's a lot of things that, for someone who's 19, 20 at the time, there's a lot of things that you had to learn. So how did you get to do that? How did you get to, like, there's a lot there.
I mean, I guess some of it is common sense. Some of it is, if I need to pay money, then I need to get money. Where am I going to get that money? So, like, working out those sorts of basic things is common sense. But then I started reaching out to, say, organizations like the Cranfield Trust, who are basically an organization that support charities and social enterprises to understand business models and help with business plans. And they're all members of high flyers in the business communities and things like that that want to use their knowledge and skills for philanthropic purposes. So there's no money there in it, but I recognise that not all applications should be for money. Some of them should be for skills and also as personal growth as well. Like, I'm curious. I want this to work. I want this to be a good job. Oh, sorry. That's my
Okay.
alarm.
That's okay.
Oh. It was on. My phone is on silent.
I believe you, yeah.
It's just not when it comes to the alarm. I think that's off.
Is that an important alarm?
It doesn't say snoozed. Medication alarm would be fine.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So Cranfield, they help businesses, they help
Yeah.
charities, and
So the Cranfield Trust got involved, and that was the interesting time when I said earlier about not all charities formed on family tragedy survive. They were very reluctant to get involved with me because, and he admitted this a few years later after they'd been involved, he admitted that he was reluctant to get involved because I founded the charity because of a family tragedy, and in their experience, those organisations tend to die out as the grief settles and as people want to move on with their lives. So they were reluctant to get involved, but he said he was glad he did. And yeah, basically helped me with the business strategy. But also then, like, there's a lot of it comes from a desire to want to do a good job as well. So, there was a lot of self-teaching. I went onto the Charity Commission website and, looked at the guidance around what does a charity that turns over. There's like criteria, like charities bringing in under $1 million and charities bringing in over $1 million. And I was like, we don't bring in $1 million, but I'm going to conform with the practice that applies to charities that bring over $1 million, because one day we're going to bring over $1 million. Yeah, right. Maybe when I'm dead and gone. But so I went through everything, and we had a risk register. We had policies for everything we needed. We had a business strategy. We had everything that we needed to be a professional, viable outfit, both in the charity community and in the business community. And I very quickly realized that naturally, if we're going to survive and we're going to grow, then we need to think like a business. So then we started getting people on the board of trustees who were involved in business. We started recruiting people with financial backgrounds or HR backgrounds or legal backgrounds or education backgrounds, and our current board of trustees consists of the lady that helped develop the first ever workshop. So one of our who's got extensive teaching experience, including in PSHE specifically, and pastoral care and all of that. So she's one of our trustees. We've got a director of HR. We've got a director of and trustee of an a big educational organisation. We've got a trustee from the criminal justice system. We have got a charity specialist accountant who's our treasurer. Yeah, we've got loads of people who are specialists in their areas that can then contribute to the charity.
That is that makes a lot of sense, right? Because the more diversity you have on your board, the more that helps you with the knowledge, because you bring in more knowledge that could then help the charity grow. So it might be that this is a good point to talk about the book for a second, because I'm going to take the book and I'm going to show it to you. It's going to be on the screen as well. And I think somewhere on it, there you go. So in the description, it says here, so the book is called When September Ends, and it came out in 2021. And it's a in-depth description of what happened, obviously, in the moment and after. And here in the description, it says, over the course of the years, Adam's efforts would send him on a real-life game of snakes and ladders, experiencing demoralizing setbacks and incredible highs. And we'll get to highs in a second, because some of them include achieving the support of many, including Paul Sinha from ITV's The Chase, but more excitingly, you meeting up with Her Majesty the Queen, well, the late Queen. So it says here, I'm going to say it again, experiencing demoralizing setbacks and incredible highs. So what are some of those demoralizing setbacks? Do they refer to a charity, or do they refer to something else?
No, so they refer to it was it's been a really difficult journey. I mean, life is difficult enough without having a murdered sibling, without then deciding to start a charity, and being in the public eye and public domain. But then also taking on the police force was probably not a wise idea. So I think some of the biggest lows for me, one, obviously the first one being defeated by Downing Street, by all that effort of the petition to not get any action. On the flip side of that, the success of the Anne Frank exhibition was a high. That was a good lift, and I was nominated for and won an Anne Frank award off the back of that, and went to Amsterdam and met fellow campaigners. So there was a highlight there and stuff to be learnt there. A low point was feeling like the police were out to get me, being interrogated by them, shut in a room, surrounded by 3 police officers, being told that I was never going to make it anywhere, and that the video was going to fail and it wasn't going to be shown in schools in their patch, whilst it was actually being shown by the same police force 1 town across, and they loved it. So it was very much a local police thing.
So the local police went up, took you, and put you in interrogation room.
Well, they didn't take me, they lured me. They lured me in to so after we had made the video, which they disrupted filming. So in order for when we made the video, we did it on a quiet industrial estate on a Saturday evening after dark, and because I didn't trust the police, because we had these various run-ins, particularly going head to head constantly in the media, me saying Lloyd was murdered in this town, these are the stats on violent crime for the Somerset area, and then the police coming on immediately afterwards saying this was an isolated incident, Taunton is very safe, that's not the statistics at all. There was constant disagreements that they were always battling with me on, but when we were recording, and because I didn't trust them, I did everything by the book. So I contacted whoever I needed to contact to arrange a road closure on this industrial estate that was basically a horseshoe shape. So we were going to film on one road, which basically meant you could still go down the road next to it. So you could still get to where you wanted to go, even though it was on an industrial estate in the middle of the night. So who would want to go anywhere there? The first night was fine. The second night, they said that in order to get the road closure, you also have to speak to the police. So I was trying to find my way the whole time. This whole process and journey of going through founding a charity and getting to where I am now has been a big learning journey, like it is for anybody. But I didn't know how to go about getting a road closure. I filled in all these paperwork, and then I was told I had to let the police know. And I let the police know on day one, and they were like, yeah, whatever. And then I let them know about day two, and they went, why are you telling us? I don't understand why you keep phoning us and telling us you're closing a road. And I was like, because I was told that I had to. And they went, well, you don't. And I was like, fine, okay. So anyway, closed the road, and this police car kept driving around an industrial estate where we were filming on a Saturday night. I'm sure they had plenty of better things to be doing. And before we closed the road, they were just driving up and down this road. And I was like, why are they here? They're going to cause a problem. I know they're going to cause a problem, because there's no need for them to be here. And this was early on before we started filming. It's like they were getting geared up to pee me off. And then basically they just kept going up and down all night. And when it got to the point, so even though we'd closed the road, they would sit in their car at one end of the road with their lights on full until we went and stopped filming and removed the road closed sign so that they could drive up. And bearing in mind, as I've just said, this was a horseshoe shape. It was a circular route. They could have taken the other road, but they didn't. They wanted to take this road. So we had to stop filming, let them through. And in the scene where we had the ambulance, the cherry picker crane, the road was blocked. So instead of, I don't know, giving up or going down the other road, they just literally sat in the camera frame, put their lights on full and sat there. And we were like, what are they doing? And so we approached them and they pulled over, and we said, what, is there a problem? You know, you've been driving up and down all night, and, you know, we're not moving. We've got a road closure notice and the road is blocked. We're not moving all these things just so you can keep driving up and down. And they were like, well, we don't know anything about this road closure. I hope you've got a notice. And thankfully, obviously, we did have the paperwork. We showed it to them and they went, oh, fine, okay then. And we didn't see them after that. But I was like, it's bull. You know, they knew the road was going to be closed. Why else were they there driving up and down at 5 o'clock in the evening when we were all just starting to gather? So they knew something was going on. Then they saw us filming. Then they saw the road closed signs. And not at any point did they come out of their car and walk over and go, oh, what's going on here then, guys? And, you know, they could have found out at any point, but instead they didn't. So it was all pure intimidation and disruption. And then once the video was made, I went and spoke to the police and I said to them, look, we want to do some interviews with different people that will be affected by violence. So I really would like an interview with the police, the A&E department, so the hospital, and the paramedics, how violence affects their services and themselves personally. A&E did it, paramedics did it, the police said, yes, we'd love to do it. They had me in to meet with some PR lady who watched the video, said it was great, really wanted to support us, and said leave it with her. She arranged for me to meet a custody sergeant. I was shown into this room with the custody sergeant, and I gave him the DVD. He put it on. Just as he pushed play, 3 other police officers came in with this PR lady, like senior police officers, blocked the door. And I mean, I like to think that they didn't deliberately intimidate me, but, you know, based on my experience to that point, it was probably deliberate. Blocked the door, so I was stuck in the room. they watched the video through in stony silence, and then they basically ripped it to shreds. Said it was scaremongering, said that it will never be shown in the schools on their patch, and it's not going to go anywhere, and they don't want anything to do with it. And then they marched out. The guy who was supposedly the custody sergeant, I had never met him before, and he looked really sad for me. And then the PR lady took me into a room somewhere else and basically said, the police think you've got an agenda, like a political agenda. And I was like, what do you think? They think I'm going to take them down or something? What are they talking about? So anyway, the police didn't get involved, and I did get a phone call later from this guy who was turned out to be one of the school's liaison officers. And he said, Adam, I'm so sorry about what happened to you. What happened is completely out of order. I don't know what the hell was happening. I really like your video, and I think that it will do really well in the schools in Taunton, and I would like to meet with you. And I said, that's great. I'm not coming back to the police station. So he said, I completely don't blame you. I'll come and meet you. So he came and met me. And lo and behold, it went round all the schools in Taunton. It went round all the schools in Yeovil. And now it's national. But yeah, so those were significant lows.
Wow.
Going head to head with the state was definitely a low. And then, but then it's always followed closely by highs and other lows, seeing charities that are in big cities that are founded based on the loss of a loved one going from 0 to 100 and being plastered all over the media, being plastered over the BBC, all these interviews with the founders and, all this notoriety and funding pumped in and us struggling away to get anywhere. That was always really disheartening. But then all of the time, these charities just disappeared into nothing. I know of literally only maybe one other charity that I could say that I've met throughout my journey that is still going.
Was it disheartening because you weren't there yet?
It was disheartening because I realised that founding and growing a charity in the county town of Somerset was going to be much harder than founding a charity in London. Because when you have, not if it was just a random charity, but one that's built on community tragedy. So like what happened to Lloyd was emotive. It could drive the community to get up in arms, get behind something, can drive something, and the local media. If it had happened in London, in front of the BBC offices, whatever, you're going to be on breakfast. You're going to get funding from the Mayor of London. You're going to get the local community up in arms. You're going to get a lot of support in London. In the county town of Somerset, you're going to get BBC Radio Somerset. You're going to get the local hospital radio. You're going to get the local BBC News, which gets all of 10 minutes for the whole programme of an evening. So your exposure is tiny.
Your exposure is tiny. However, if you think about it, I can see where you're coming from. But at the same time, what I'm thinking of is, if you look at London has got, if you look at the crime rate, it's quite high, right? You hear about gang violence, you hear about people getting stabbed. A couple of years ago, there was this guy, I remember because it was a crazy story reading in the news, that he threw some sort of acid on his ex-girlfriend or something like that, and then police tried to find him for 2 or 3 days. He obviously committed suicide. I think he jumped in the Thames. But what I'm trying to say here is the fact that London is big, and even though the Mayor of London can come out and support that, the Mayor of London is not going to come out and support every single murder that's going to happen in London, because London is massive.
Yeah.
But then you look at Taunton, and something like that happens, because the community is not, I mean, compare it to London, you can't even compare the two numbers, right? You've got better chance at, or at least, well, I say that not having run and not being through the experience, but my sort of like thinking would be, well, you can get better coverage because they will want to cover it. They're more incentivized, like, hey, that's happening in our community. Our community is small. Let's raise the awareness on this.
But it doesn't hit national.
It doesn't hit national.
And that's where that's the difference. If something happens in the capital or a big city, it very quickly or much more easily escalates to national profile. Something that happens in a county town under the flag of ITV Southwest or
Somerset
BBC
Live,
Somerset, it tends to, the only way it, I mean, I didn't realize how non-communicative all of these all of these organizations are, but the only way that would ever get picked up to a national level and you would get on BBC Breakfast to talk to Naga and Charlie is literally if they were having a really quiet day and they happened to discover that there's some story going on in Somerset somewhere. But I mean, of course, like the BBC sensationalize everything and find the worst in everything. So there's always some big story going on somewhere these days. Yeah.
But you've made it to a national level. And one of the things that proves that is the fact that you've met with the Queen. So tell me about what was the reason for the meeting and how that was like.
Well, I mean, so that was because we won an award. I think one of the benefits of not being picked up on a national level and given loads of money and elevated really quickly is that slow, steady, organic growth, as frustrating and annoying as it is, leads to more robust long-term success. And it's a lesson I've learned time and time again, that cash injections of money and media support doesn't necessarily lead to long-term gain. It leads to quick success, which can be very short-lived and unstable, and then you can fall back down again. Whereas slow and steady progress is more sustainable, even though it's more frustrating. And because you've gone through the turbulent peaks and troughs, you're more resilient, you're more robust. And we won the Queen's Award for charity sector services. I can't remember what year, 2012, I think it was. And that was probably our first big national award. And that was a high because it was like a final recognition that, yeah, we've actually made a significant impact and a significant contribution to the level that, it's been recognized by a national award. Because we've had awards before from local sort of southwest based things, but nothing like that. And yeah, we went to the garden party as part of that award. You got invited to the Buckingham Palace garden party, and we were chosen to be one of the groups that got to meet the Queen, which was brilliant. Yeah, such a weird moment. Like to shake her hand and then to have a conversation with this, essentially this legend of, British culture and history. Yeah.
How tall are you? How tall are you?
5'9", 5'10".
Because she is short. Well, she was short.
Yes. Yeah, she was. I mean, she definitely shrank in her old age. She just reminded me of my nana, really, in some respects. Like she was quite short. She's quite frail. She had a terrible shade of lipstick, and it was all over her teeth when she was talking. And she was all dressed in yellow with a little hat on. And yeah, but I mean, like, she was incredible. I don't know how old she was then in 2012, but she was old and she was walking completely unaided on soft grass because it was wet in blooming heels. And
She was wearing heels.
I'm sure she was wearing heels.
Oh my god, I can't
Was
even.
she heels?
You know what? I've never realized. Yeah, she must have, right? Because like she's a.
She surely usually does.
She
I
probably
don't
does.
know. I don't know. I can't be. I can't guarantee that. But either way,
Yeah.
it was boggy terrain. Like, you know, it wasn't like solid tarmac path. Unaided, strong stride from like the back of the palace, and the royal tent and whatever was quite far away. And on the journey from the back of the palace to this tent, there was like, I don't know, 8 to 10 groups of people waiting to be met by the Queen as she did her walk through. And I was just thinking, this woman's incredible. You know, she's doing this walk at her age on soggy ground, and at each group, she's stopping and chatting and smiling. You know, I mean, like, even now at the age of 39, you got me to speak to, you know, dinner's there, I'm hungry, and you've just lined 6 groups of people up on my walk to my dinner table. I'm not going to be smiling. I'm going to be like, all right, all right, all right, that'll be about it. Whereas,
Yeah.
but I mean, like, I think we were the 3rd group that she spoke to.
So only halfway there, she was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, come on."
But she was, and she, yeah, and she was great. Like, she asked questions, and when you responded, she asked a follow-up question that showed she was listening to what you were saying. And you just think, this is a woman that spends her life listening to people talk about what matters to them and how they're so passionate about what happens, you know, to them. You know, she was she that interested in violence prevention coming from the royal family? I don't know, but the way she spoke about violence, it was like she knew the issue of violence. She knew how important it was. She understood why I was doing what I was doing. And, you know, you really genuinely felt like she absorbed what you said, and she understood and she empathized with you. And there was, you know, I was just impressed that a lady of her age could make you feel so much like she actually cared about what you were saying, rather than just like, this is my job to just listen to people go on about their stuff.
So apart from her asking follow-up questions that were relevant to what you had just said, how else do you think she made you feel that she was listening and caring and obviously?
Well, it was because it was conversational. It wasn't like, you know, like, I probably used the wrong word when I said follow-up questions. It was a flowing conversation that, you know, like you and I are having, you know, like when we met first before, you know, there was just that flowing conversation of interest and back and forth conversation on the same topic, that shows that somebody is interested and it's not just a lip service thing.
Okay, that's cool. Makes more sense, to be honest.
Mm.
Was she when she was walking through the groups? Was she slow? Was she walking slowly or was she
Yeah. Average.
average? Okay,
Yeah. She was followed by a lot of guards.
I bet.
Yeah.
Were you carrying guns or swords?
Neither. They were carrying umbrellas.
Sure, I guess.
I don't know whether there was guns within the umbrellas, but they didn't have. And then the other lot were the beef eaters, and I don't think they'd be very good in a fight. I don't know.
Was there anything she said to you that you still remember?
No, not really. Nothing sticks out. I just remember the sort of like softness of her voice and the lipstick on the teeth. And just like how I felt that she was genuinely listening and caring. But yeah.
Wow, that is crazy. I'm sitting there with someone who's met and spoken with the queen. That is absolutely crazy. Come to think of it, you said there was the tent and there was food in the tent,
Yeah.
and this makes me think of there's that viral meme slash video of her cutting a cake with one of the guards' sword.
Okay.
And when she was there, they're like, did you see her eat? This is a really random question, but like,
No, I didn't. I was too busy eating
oh, you're too
myself.
easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you went, or obviously you got the award. In the book, you also mentioned you got the support of many, including Paul Sinha from ITV's The Chase. So how was this support looking like? Like advertisement, PR?
Yeah, so Paul did a bit of stuff for us on sort of socials, but more importantly, he used to run an annual quiz night for us because obviously he's a chaser and he's renowned for his quizzing. So he offered to come to Taunton once a year and run a quiz night for us, which was always a sellout, always made loads of money, which was great. And he really enjoyed doing it. But then, of course, he unfortunately got his Parkinson's diagnosis and he didn't know how that was going to pan out for him and needed to reduce any stress. So he decided to step back from it. But he's still been very supportive, and every now and then we hear through his agent that he's done a TV quiz show and he's raised the money for us, like a celebrity quiz show, and he's donated the money to us. So we still get contact from him, which is great. And actually that came about because one of our, at the time, volunteers went to see him at a performance. So he was doing a stand-up show, and I don't know how, but they ended up talking afterwards, and Paul decided he wanted to go for a few drinks. And so our volunteer took him to a nightclub, and basically they drank together all night, and she told him all about the charity that she volunteers for, and Paul was like, sounds like a great charity. I'd love to help if I could. So
Wow.
yeah. Yeah.
That is crazy. I think one of the common no, sorry, let me rephrase that. I think from everything you've described, going back to one of the things you mentioned back when you were a kid and when you started that petition to remove the canteen lady because she just wasn't nice, and going from there to you talking with your friend, and she mentioning to you the fact that, hey, maybe you should do a campaign about this, and you literally on the same day drawing out the logo and then thinking about, oh, well, how can I take this to the next level? I'm gonna go speak with maybe some people from the police, some people from the ambulance, some people from the loads of people who could help you do this, and then obviously gathering 26,000 signatures to then take to Downing Street and make a proposal. Unsuccessful, but still do that. And again, at the age of, at that point, 19, 20, 21, still very young. And then from then you went and you started the what is now your educational content, created the short movie, and then took that and said, okay, let's get some freelance teacher, a freelance teacher, and let's go to different schools, and then take that even further from something that's local to a national stage and having to learn how to treat it as a business, doing all of that self-learning you mentioned. I'm saying all of this because when you when you and I were talking off camera, we also mentioned here about how you sort of like struggle with communicating when you got invited by the Reverend, I think, to speak about in front of other people about what had happened to Lloyd, and you thinking to yourself, well, what am I gonna say? And then you came up with a presentation. There's a lot of not just communication that you are doing well, even though maybe obviously in the moment maybe it might have not felt like it, but also taking that initiative, which you did say at the beginning, that if you see something that doesn't seem right, you'll try to change it, and you did when you at least tried to when you were a kid. and then obviously taking that to the charity side and growing all of that and going back to again what I said earlier, not that many people would do that. If someone's close one would get murdered, killed, chances are they wouldn't start a charity. They wouldn't do what you've done. And I think that's just absolutely, that goes to show to the person you are now and the person you've always been. And obviously this episode has been centered around what happened to Lloyd, what's happened since with the charity with you, and we're gonna do another one. We're gonna focus on what you're doing now, because you're doing some really exciting stuff now as well with the business you've started, and you've started it in a very. I say it to a couple of my friends at work, and I say it to one of my friends, Wasim, and Wasim, he always listens to the podcast. He always gives feedback, and when I said to him, just making a small side note here, when I told him about the thing you're doing and how you've approached it. I'm not gonna say it now because I want that to be a second episode. When I said that to him, he said, "Mate, he's gonna be successful."
Okay.
And
Well, that's reassuring. Okay. When does he
Yeah.
want to come and see me?
So we'll see. He can book you in.
Yeah.
So again, I'm saying all of this because it's absolutely great, and it's absolutely, you should be proud of yourself. I'm fascinated by all of this. This is just what you've done, how you've approached it, and how you've done all the self-learning to start something like this and take it to a national level. You met the queen. You met the queen.
Yeah.
It's
Met
it's
the queen.
all
Yeah.
it's all crazy, and obviously, unfortunately, it all started from a very tragic event. I guess three more questions, really. I want to get out of you is question number one. You've definitely helped thousands and thousands of people, primarily kids, right? Because all this is in schools. Do you know of has any one kid come up to you and ever said to you, "Hey, this presentation has helped me because this was my situation. You came at the right time, and I don't know, I was maybe in a bad situation or in a bad headspace, and I think this has helped me." Or like, do you have any story of like someone coming up to you and say, "You've helped me because dot dot dot."
So, I mean, I haven't got any like big awe-inspiring stories. Obviously, there's the ones that we talked about, such as the guy that created the rap. So obviously that shows a significant impact on him and the young offenders that missed their cigarette break, which is apparently a big deal to them. But I do remember being at a community event once, doing a stand, and a girl came up to me and said, "Oh, you came into our school a few years ago, and I remember it still now." And I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah. And how did you find it?" And she said, "Oh, it was so good, and it was what we needed. It was so much needed." And I said, "Oh, and do you think it was helpful? Was it very beneficial?" And she said, "Honestly, from the moment you came in, there was no more bullying or fighting that I witnessed in our year from that point onwards." She said, "Before you came in, it was awful. It was every day there was some fight going on somewhere. There was bullying everywhere in this school. And from the moment we came in and went," she said she didn't see any playground fights after that in her year group. Which obviously, if that's true, that's crazy. I mean, that was back in the day when we were sort of doing big groups. So we were, schools just don't seem to have the money these days to be able to facilitate us to go in and do things on that level, which is such a shame, because if it's true and we manage to reduce their violence rates in the school, then we should be in every school to every year. And that's what I would love to see. I'm interfering with the microphone.
That's okay.
That's what I would love to see. I would love to see us in every school in the UK, every age group, every so every year 9 gets our violence prevention with Lloyd's story. Every year 7 gets our transition program where you're teaching young people, you know, how to feel emotion and deal with emotion and how to, you know, be independent people. Every single kid in primary school gets our emotional resilience program where they start to learn what emotions are and how to feel them and how to process them. So literally right from primary school, Sav are there with their in their life. They all start to develop foundations for knowing about emotions and how to deal with emotions, and that emotions are fine and they're good and they shouldn't result in you punching somebody. Also about, you know, like the gangs and grooming, what is a true friend, what is a false friend, how to avoid getting caught up in gang culture. Then going into secondary school and starting to, you know, that program and sort of building it up. I would love to see our charity teaching valuable subjects, valuable lessons to people at all ages across the whole country. That'd be a long-term plan.
So I guess this sort of, I was gonna ask this at the very end of the third question, but you're kind of like answering it now. It was gonna be, what do you think the future of the charity should be or will be? Just because I think you've sort of taken a step back.
Yeah, so as I said, like, you know, I would love to be the next Bernardo's in terms of, I mean, like without the dodgy past. Yeah, let's maybe. I mean, I don't know why I plucked Bernardo's out of the air. I probably shouldn't have, should I? I mean, but then I don't think there's many of the big charities that have got a clean history. So well, can't even say.
Yeah, when I said earlier
the next
about
Oxfam, well, they've got an even more dodgy history even recently. But I would love for us to be a big, well-known, well-respected charity that's really like making waves. You know, I would love for us to be delivering our educational workshops and content to every year group in every school so that they're getting some exposure and some sort of valuable life lesson.
So then the two things that I will ask for you now is, which they just slipped my mind. What is the number one thing that the church is doing now to get that? And then the follow-up will be, what do you think they should also be doing that they're not doing now?
The charity.
Yeah.
So at the moment, once again, we're probably in a bit of a stale situation at the moment in that school funding is worse than it's ever been under a Labour government, of all things. And schools are not, our school bookings and our reach has plummeted over the last couple of years. So we're now in a position where we're having to rethink everything we're doing. So we're just formulating the strategy now for the next couple of years, and our next year is currently looking like we're going to be developing a train the trainer approach where we will accredit schools. So we'll go in and we will train their staff to deliver our workshop materials, and we will license them with an access to our materials for a year, and then they need refresher training every year. And that way it should be more cost effective for the school, regular income for us, and we can continue to communicate our message and reach more people. So that's kind of our initial thoughts, but we're open to other ideas from any podcast listeners if they've got any amazing words of wisdom for how a charity can survive through this. But yeah, that's what we're looking at, because schools just aren't able to get us in to talk to 30 kids at a time. So we've already noticed they get us in now and they say, oh, we want you to come in and deliver our workshop that's designed for 30 kids. And then suddenly we're in front of an assembly full of 1,000 kids. And it's like, well, you're just not getting the same benefit.
And obviously, I was also asking, what else do you think you should be doing that you're not doing? But I think that's a bit of a useless question, actually, because you know what you're doing and you know what you need to focus on. So yeah.
Yeah, well, we think, but that's the difficulty with the charity sector. Is it's just, I know the business sector is the same. You know, things change; they're in state of flux. But for us, working with the public sector, which schools are, in a topic that is not a sexy, desirable topic, especially, and one of the downsides is, unfortunately, the charity name, Stand Against Violence. I'm sure there is some issue around schools not wanting to have Stand Against Violence teaching kids in their school for image reasons. I think we have come across that before. Well, we don't have a problem with violence, so we don't want you in. Even though it's like, well, it's preventative. And I'm sure you do have a problem with violence. You just don't like to talk about it because every school's got bullies. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And probably, well, when I was before high school, I was definitely a bully. Our
You were a
class,
bully.
our class was full
Yeah.
of bullies. It
Oh.
wasn't just me. It was like
No.
pretty much all the guys there were like bullies.
Yeah.
I changed since then. I changed. I promise. The final question, I guess, just because it might be a nice wrap up, is part of the book. I'm trying to find if there's the sentence that mentioned that. Oh, yeah. Part of the book, it says here, it also offers the perspective of the charity's least likely supporter, one of Lloyd's killers, and describes the impact of a global event. Okay, ... So you've met up with one of the killers. So I guess the wrap up I'm looking for is what that was like.
Yeah, so
and I'm sorry, what that was like and how it helped your charity, because that's a very unexpected move.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's been several points. And I think this is one of my lessons that I learned along the way, is about listening to your gut instinct and your intuition, which I fail to do over and over and over and over again. I do it, that's just me. I always go, my gut's saying this and I'm going to go and do that. I don't know why I do it, because, and maybe part of it is like a passion and ambition. We're going to get from A to B. And even though my gut is saying it's not the right time, I'm still damn well going to push towards that. And then you end up causing all sorts of problems. But there have been several very clear points along my journey where something in me has gone, you must do this. One was the film. You've got to do this. Pick up that phone to send that email to that stunt coordinator. Why not? I couldn't sleep one night, so I wrote the entire script in one night for the reconstruction. Just because it was there, I literally had it being told to me what I needed to put into this script. My mind was going crazy with creative juices. And another one was, you need to meet with Jay. I just remember getting it in my head one day that I really needed to meet with Jay. It would be great for the charity. We've seen so many of these, like I was saying before, the angry young men that are like, how dare Adam not just go and beat 10 bales of crap out of Jay and get his revenge, who are the people that are likely to become a Jay. So actually what we really need is Jay to say, actually, you're me. We need these kids that are getting angry about what Jay's done, who are actually mini Jays, to hear Jay's story, where Jay says, basically describes their life now, because that's why they're angry. He was angry because he was part of an abusive home with domestic violence, which left him angry, isolated, being taken from refuge to refuge, being taken back into the toxic environment and out of the toxic environment, being removed from his friends, getting involved in drugs. All of those things led him down the path in life to end up killing somebody and going to prison for murder. Well, half the kids that are getting angry about what Jay's done are troubled kids from troubled backgrounds. So actually, if we can get Jay to if we can communicate how Jay is them, it might be a penny drop moment for them to go, oh, okay, I'm heading down the wrong path. So for me, I got it in my head that it would be a really beneficial thing to do. It would give a new dimension to the work we were doing in schools, and it would really hit home to those kids why I'm not going out to get revenge and focusing more on educating and raising awareness. And around about the time that I couldn't get it out of my head, I got a phone call from probation saying Jay is coming up for release. And I said, brilliant, I want to meet him. And they were like, well, I'll ask him. And I don't think they even asked him, because I think they literally said, Jay has offered to meet you if you would like to. I was like, yes. So yeah, it was, I think, his final year before he was released. So he was in Newmarket in one of the open prisons. So I went up to meet him in the prison. I remember getting the train out to go via London. I remember having a bit of a panic attack that I didn't really recognize as a panic attack at first. I just suddenly started noticing that that I was getting pins and needles. And I've never had a panic attack before, but obviously working in healthcare, I recognize the signs and symptoms of hyperventilation, and I was like, why? And then I sort of like focused on my breathing and realized and calmed myself down. And then I managed to navigate across London, get another train out to Newmarket. And then when I was in Newmarket, I literally was just like, what am I doing? Like, I had in my mind that I was going to meet this chavvy, not very pleasant person. My dad phoned to check in and said, how are you doing? And I was just literally burst into tears and had to hang up on him. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then they phoned back and they said, are you okay? Do you want us to drive over and get you? And I was like, no, I'm doing this. I am doing this. I got all the way here. I'm doing it. Thank you. And my probation liaison worker picked me up in the morning. We drove to the prison. I was taken through, shown into this room, and this guy who looked perfectly normal, very presentable, hair done, jeans and a shirt, really calm attitude about him. Like, honestly, you would not know. Like, and he was so open and transparent, and so like, I know how much I have wronged you, and I would do anything to take back what I did. I am not gonna hold anything back. Whatever you want to know, I'll tell you. I've faced it. I've come to terms with it. I've come to terms with what I've done, and I do not want to make anything worse for you. So if you've got questions that you need answers to, I'm not going to hold anything back from you. And he'd written a letter and all sorts. And yeah, we're just like chatting, and I went from like feeling almost I'm going to be really angry at him to actually feeling sorry for him and being angry at his mum. I was angry at his mum for allowing this cycle of violence to continue, because she was in an abusive relationship that she got out of once and then went back to, and used Jay as a shield, because it was only when Jay was around that she wasn't beaten. So she would keep him up all night, keep him away from school, from friends, anything, because he was the shield. Not a physical shield, but when he was there, she wouldn't get beaten. So I ended up thinking, like, you used your son became bitter, angry and twisted and killed my brother. So it's like, but it's not even her fault. It's like, this is just the cycle of violence, and that's what we're trying to break. Through education and through raising awareness. And yeah, so met with him, learnt his side of the story. When he left prison, we kept in touch a little bit. I said, would you do some interviews with us so we can create your story to add to our materials? And he said yes. And then we also used the interviews with him to write his chapters in the book. So basically, yeah, the the uniqueness of the book is it tells my story and Lloyd's story and Jay's story. So you've got Jay growing up, you've got me and Lloyd growing up, and then you've got how the stories converge and then how they go very differently afterwards, with me going down the charity route and Jay going to prison, and then everything after that. So it's quite a uniquely written book.
So for anyone wanting to obviously find more about Jay's story, read the book When September Ends. It's on Amazon. I checked last night.
Yeah, and it's in Waterstones. Well, online.
Yeah.
That was a high moment. That was a success moment.
I bet, yeah. Adam, thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you talking about all of this. And as I was thinking about how the episode would look like, I kept thinking to myself, would I even be comfortable going through all of this if I was you? And you've been absolutely amazing. So just thank you.
Thanks. I'm so used to it. I've talked the story to death, literally.
We'll put the obviously the link to the charity in the section. We'll put the book in the section. Is there anything else we should put in the section to advertise for you?
No. Did you say my website? The website.
So yeah, we're gonna put the tag as well in the
Perfect.
website.
Yeah.
If people want to donate, obviously.
Donate. Yeah,
donate.
exactly.
If
Yeah.
people want to donate, absolutely
just do a quick recap on the fact that we get no funding and that we've never managed to get a grant more than 25 grand once in 20 years.
Yeah, and I think
so funding is always welcome. Donations of any type.
And I think you said out of like 20 applications, just one might go through. So that's 0.5%.
Yeah, and it's always the 5 grand ones, never the 20 grand ones.
Yeah.
So it all adds up,
Yeah.
but it's a lot of effort. So yeah, we're grateful for anything, whether it's small donations, whether it's just somebody that works for a company that has a charity of the year that they can nominate us for. You know, we've just been part of Porter Dodson's year of fundraising. I mean, that makes such a big difference. It's like a couple of grand over a year, but it makes a big difference.
Absolutely, because if you can get those freelance teachers to go and travel the country and go to the schools, and as you've just described with the girl who came up to your stand and said, ever since you gave that talk in my ear, I didn't see any more violence, which, if true, that's absolutely, I mean, it must be true. Because you look at all the figure, like...
Well, and all of our feedback is like, 87% of people that are engaged with our workshops change their attitudes towards violence in a pro-social manner. So,
and that's on your website as well, I saw.
Yeah. So potentially we've saved hundreds of lives, or at least prevented hundreds of incidences of violence from occurring. But the sad thing is that we can never prove that. So we just have to believe that. Yeah.
Thank you again. For people listening to this, let me tell you, in this room right now, it's so cold, and you're wearing a t-shirt. I'm freezing cold, and I'm wearing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I say, the things I do for charity,
so
they better be grateful that I've sat here in the charity t-shirt.
So I've got something for you. I give this to everyone who comes on the episode.
Oh, okay.
I know you're trying to be really, really healthy.
Yeah,
but this is
I'm
actually
failing at the moment.
This is for you.
Thank you.
It's got a small, very short story behind it.
Well, it's also dark chocolate, so that's
dark
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, don't look at the nutritional information then.
Okay, sugar, 100%.
Probably. So it's got a very funny story to it. So when I was a kid, I was obviously in love with chocolate like any other kid, right? And I was obviously I was getting like chocolate bars, and whenever I would like take a bite, I would quickly come to realize that it's not got enough chocolate. Fast forward to high school, one of these girls, she comes up to me and says, "Hey, have you tried this chocolate bar?" I was like, "No, let me have it." She gives me the chocolate bar. It's the best chocolate bar you will ever have.
Okay.
It's got so much on the first bite, I'm telling you, on the first bite, it's got so much chocolate, you'll be in love.
Okay.
You do need water for it, by the way, but yeah.
It's also called Dare.
Yeah.
And that's great when you're interviewing people that are entrepreneurs, business people, people that dare to to reach high.
That's a really good point. Maybe I should start with that.
Oh, there you
pitch.
go, yeah. Give them a dare bar.
Give them
Dare
a
to
bar.
be the best
Dare
you.
to be the best. Adam, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.